Welcome in here to the Friday Shoot Around. I am Ryan Gilbert. Today we are joined by former Wildcat Jay Heidrick. Jay, of course, played back in the 90s and has been a longtime friend of Go Power Cat through the years. Jay, how are you, man? We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I mean, especially after the big win this week, so it's awesome.
We're sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company. Real quick, if you haven't checked them out, go to your local liquor store. Check out the Cape Cod, the club special, 2 really good drinks. Be sure to check those out. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure you're hitting subscribe. It really helps us grow and reach more K-Staters to watch our videos. But Jay, I know we want to talk about this KU game, but before we do that, I think we got to touch on this TCU loss for just a few minutes. And we talked with Pearson McAtee last week on the show. Since then, we've had the TCU game and the KU game. So this TCU matchup, I think, really did present some serious matchup issues that really can't be overlooked. Eddie Lampkin down low really gave K-State some fits. Obviously, KU was a much better draw for K-State, but do you agree that that was kind of just maybe a sloppy game and a bad matchup for K-State against TCU?
I mean, yeah, I mean, they obviously didn't play well. They didn't finish well around the rim, missed a lot of bunnies. It's a meat grinder of a conference. I mean, to expect that you're going to go in and play excellent every night, and even if you play excellent, you may still lose. The fact that they had 28 or 20, they give up, I think, 28 points off of turnovers and only lost by 14 tells you that it probably wasn't as bad as it looked. But yeah, it's one of those games that you flush, you move on. And I think that Lincoln does present a matchup problem. He presents a matchup problem for a lot of schools in the conference. KU's a better matchup. You know, K-State's really long, they're really bouncy, really athletic, but they're not particularly big in the post as far as thickness. And so when you get someone like Lampkin, who is a really good athlete, really strong, really big body, he's going to present some issues. And to me, the bigger issue was they just didn't take care of the ball. And TCU likes to go up and down. And when you give a team like TCU 20 additional possessions that you get nothing out of, that's what you're going to see. So I didn't think at the time, and I still don't think that it's a huge cause for concern. I think Coach Tang and his staff will make adjustments that are necessary. I think the players will make adjustments next time they play them around, and they show that they grew from it. They didn't let that one loss turn into 2 losses coming into KU on Tuesday.
And that's where I wanted to go with this next point. Do you think that maybe losing to TCU helped Kansas State kind of just settle in and say, hey, we got to keep working, we got to bounce back and be resilient? Do you think that maybe if K-State was undefeated going into this KU game, they would have maybe overlooked the Jayhawks a little bit? Do you think a loss helped K-State?
In a roundabout way, yeah. I don't think they would have ever overlooked the Jayhawks, but I think the pressure would have been more. You know, they're an undefeated team coming in. They probably would have been a top 10 team going into the game with KU. And so I don't think they would have overlooked them, but I think the pressure would have been more. I thought they came out Tuesday night and played really loose early. That showed they jumped out. I thought that they kind of tightened up a little bit, but they always just maintain their composure and were able to answer KU on the runs when necessary. Does that happen? Did they get the same start on Tuesday night if they beat TCU? Maybe, maybe not. But I do think that, you know, in a roundabout way, you never want to lose a game, but there's always things you can pull from a loss that are helpful. And I think that was certainly one of them that came through. And I think there's maybe a little bit of overlooking TCU on on Saturday when you had the KU game coming up this week too. So all in all, you know, all's well that ends well. And I think that, you know, you learn things from a loss and got a big win on Tuesday. And I like where K-State sits.
All right, let's dive into the KU game. I don't even know where to start, but Jay, that's got to be probably the biggest win in years for K-State, right?
Yeah, it's the biggest win in years because on a number of fronts. One, it just continues what Coach Tang has been saying is that, you know, we're here to elevate, we're here to build. You know, Bruce had some success against KU. I think he beat him twice maybe. So it's not like Bruce was on a huge losing streak, but I think that this one just feels different because I don't think anyone looks at that game on Tuesday and says, this is an anomaly. I certainly didn't. I came out of that game Tuesday and thought that K-State is just as good, if not better than KU. I think K-State's more athletic. Jalen Wilson obviously put on just an incredible performance, but you got to remember K-State didn't get much out of Marquise Noel. They have a starter with Gasson that's out. And so there's a lot of things that went wrong. You could look on both sides and say, but what if? But I don't think anyone with looking at it rationally left Tuesday thinking, wow, that was just a fluke by K-State. I think K-State is just as good, if not better than KU this year from when you look at it from the top to bottom.
What can you say about Coach Tang and the way that they coached this game? Rodney Perry was on the scout for Tuesday night's game, and there were a couple times where K-State, coming out of a timeout, had a couple easy points. And the same thing can be said for Bill Self and KU, right? I think it was a good coaching battle. But what does it say about the way Coach Tang was able to go toe-to-toe with one of the top coaches in the country, if not the top coach?
Yeah, I think that Bill Self is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. I think he's probably the best coach in the country at getting buckets out of timeouts historically. Maybe Coach Tang's better than him. I don't know. It's certainly a small sample size, but he showed some promise in that on Tuesday night. But I think what was really telling in that point was that K-State got key buckets out of bounds. You look at the lob coming out of that timeout towards the end of the game to Keontae. But the one thing that hasn't been discussed a whole lot is that at the end of regulation and at the end of overtime, Coach Self called timeouts, and they were coming out of timeouts to draw those sets up, something that is in his wheelhouse and he's exceptional at. And they got nothing out of it because they turned the ball over on both possessions. So I think that shows the scout and whether K-State knew what was coming or not. I don't know. I wasn't in the huddle. But it shows that K-State was prepared. They knew the tendencies. They knew what was going to happen. And they certainly weren't scared as to what was coming at them. So I think that's something that's been overlooked as well, too, is, this game was set up right for KU to win this in Bill Self's wheelhouse, and they got nothing out of it.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Self mentioned that post game that he had multiple chances with the ball to go out and win the game. And if you would have told him that before the game, he'd say, heck yeah, sign me up for that. And whether that was K-State just playing good defense or KU not executing, who knows? But I think some credit has to be given to the staff with K-State. And I asked this to Pearson last week on the show. He's gotten a chance to connect with the staff. I know you got to take in a practice, right? You've got to know them. What have your interactions just been with this staff?
They're phenomenal. And I say phenomenal, I mean, in every sense of the word. They're not just phenomenal coaches. They're just phenomenal people. There's been a lot of talk this week about the chant and how we should view K-State or KU as K-Staters. And that's just coming from, it's not a, KU versus K-State. That's coming from Coach Tang's heart. I mean, he truly believes there's enough hate in this world. Let's show up not because we hate KU, but because we love K-State. Let's express it from a position of love of our university as opposed to hatred of the other. And everyone can say, "Oh, that's mushy, that's hokey." We hate KU, all these things. But at the end of the day, it's college sports, guys. And yes, it's important to us, but if your kid has cancer and you take your kid to the KU Cancer Center, are you going to care if the doctor is a KU graduate, or you just want that doctor to help your kid? Those are the things I think Coach Tang is trying to reach at, is that let's enjoy college sports for what they are. And we can have rivalries. We don't have to like playing KU. We don't have to like the things that their fans say and do, and they don't have to like us, and they don't have to like the things our fans say and do. But at the end of the day, let's show up with the love for our university as opposed to the hatred of it. I think that also one thing that gets overlooked with it too, I think he's concerned about how it appears to recruits too, and particularly their families.
Yep.
If you're sitting there with a recruit and his mother and his father, and they're people like Coach Tang and the staff that are devout, they have a strong belief in their faith, and they see a university and a group of people chanting that just doesn't look good, because they don't understand. You can say, well, it's just a rivalry, but people who you want to come to Kansas State, they don't appreciate that rivalry when they're on their visit. All they do is see thousands of people chanting FKU, and that's not a great look.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned all of that, because I was going to ask you what your kind of views and opinions were just on not only the chant, but what Coach Tang had to say about it. And I appreciate the fact that Tang really kind of downplayed the rivalry. Now, I'm sure deep down he knows the importance of this game, but just making sure that I think not only his players but the fans understand that it's just one game, right? You go 1-0 or you go 0-1. It doesn't give you the Big 12, doesn't win you a national title, right? So I appreciate that he did that. Jay, I'm curious, as you know, you played back in the 90s, right? I wasn't born at that time. Has this rivalry really changed much since then? I know the chant has, that's only been a thing of the last 10, 15 years, right? Was that a thing back then?
No, it wasn't. I mean, when I played, half the stadium was KU fans because that was the only way to get a ticket to watch a KU game was to come to K State. And I remember hearing Rock Chalk Jayhawk in Brandwood. So yeah, the rivalry has changed because I think K State's elevated to a spot where it is more competitive. And the other thing too that goes along with it is I think Coach Tang is wanting to say your goal can't be to beat KU. So that atmosphere on Tuesday was incredible. And I think what he's saying is, why can't that atmosphere be there on Saturday now? I mean, if you're really coming because you love K-State and you want the Wildcats to do well, then that atmosphere should be there on Saturday too. Now, it's not going to be as intense. It's not going to be at the same level as your rival. But I think that's what he's saying is that, our goal can't be to beat KU. There are bigger things out there for this program. And that's how I think as K-Staters, we have to move beyond. I mean, this season is not going to be a success just because we beat KU. And had we lost on Tuesday, this season wouldn't have been a failure just because we lost to KU. We have to get out of our mindset of beating KU in basketball is the end all be all. There are bigger things out there than just beating KU. And I think that's what he wants to focus on is let's focus on us.
Let's go back to the game a little bit and just talk about the play of Desi Sills in the bench for Kansas State. Ish Massoud had some great energy, knocked down a couple big shots. He had a block shot early on when he checked in. But Desi Sills was really kind of the story of this game. Marquise Noel, I don't think he played that bad of a game. I think KU just said, hey, we're going to take you out and make somebody else step up. And I don't know if Keontae Johnson wasn't as important to Bill Self, but Keontae Johnson scored 24 and so did Desi Sills. What can you say about just the confidence that guy's playing with, especially coming off the bench?
Yeah, I mean, winners win. That's what I texted Coach Sutton after the game, or Coach Tang after the game. I said, hey, great win, winners win. And he said that several times too. I think that, that's one of the benefits, I think, of having a completely revamped roster is these guys know the importance of the game. They obviously feel it around the community, what's happening with it. But at the same time, too, they're not intimidated by it. I mean, they've never played KU before. They've never done those things. And so it's just, it's a big time game. And when you have guys that believe in one another and believe in the system and are disciplined and willing to buy into it, this is what happens. It's a product of it. You get someone else who steps up, Ish struggled on defense this year a lot, had that block. I did not have Ish Massoud making a defensive play to win the game on my K-State bingo card for the game. And I don't think anyone else did either, but he did. He stepped up and he made it. And I think Keontae is just Keontae. I mean, that guy's a dude. And he's the type of player that it doesn't matter how you scheme. He can just go get his. And Self did that a little bit. He targeted. I thought he would target Keontae early in games, especially when K-State was on defense, because Keontae sometimes struggles on his rotations and at times with defensive intensity. And I thought Self would go after him and say, you're either going to give up buckets or we're going to get fouls, one of the two. And he did a little bit, but I thought Keontae responded as well too on the defensive end as well. And so it was an all-around team effort. I agree with Marquise. He didn't have the stat line on the points, but he did a great job running the show. Came up with some steals late, and was just a presence. He was felt. He may not have scored, but his presence was definitely felt. And Desi was just incredible, hitting big shot after big shot. But that's what it takes. I mean, that's what it takes to beat the number 2 team in the country, whether it's KU or Baylor or Kentucky or Duke or whoever. You got to have people step up if you want to do that.
Certainly. And Naquan Tomlin's been that guy this year. I mean, Keontae and Noel have been the two superstars night in and night out, but it's good to see multiple players stepping up down the stretch when it matters most. Jay, we'll wrap up the first half with this. um, David Gasson did not play in this game, and I want to be fair and mention that, Grady Dick fouled out in overtime. Kevin McCullough, he fouled out early on. KJ Adams, he fouled out in regulation, right? And, DeJuan Harris went to the locker room for a second. I don't know what happened with him, but so I want to be fair and point out that, both teams might have been shorthanded, but once David Gasson comes back, how important can he be as a scorer? But also, what does it say just about Kansas State? They're able to win this game without one of their best players.
I think it's huge. And, I don't think it's fair to say that K-State didn't have Gasson. I mean, yeah, all those players for KU fouled out, but they played. K-State had to play the same refs KU did. And K-State was able to manage it. So the fact they fouled out isn't exactly move the needle for me. The fact that Gasson didn't even have a chance to get in there is huge. And I think Bebe's done a fine job filling in. Bebe is he's not a frontline player right now. He is a guy, he's a reserve who can come in, give you minutes and do a good job. But I don't think he can fill the same role that Gasson was filling before his injury. So when he comes back, it's going to be great to see K-State have some additional depth in the post. Ish has done a fine job filling in the four as well too, but that's not his favorite spot. It's not his natural spot, particularly on the defensive end. I think that allows Ish to maybe go to more of his natural role of coming in as an offensive threat, and it will probably be reduced minutes. But I think that Ish has done a great job of accepting his revised role this year. So when Gasson comes back, I think we're going to have some more help on the rebounding end, on the offensive end especially. He's a phenomenal athlete, and I think that hopefully we can just mesh with what we have with Bebe and Ish, blending in with their roles as well.
Yeah, Bebe's been a serviceable backup, and Masood's really stepped up without Gasson. So it's good to see those guys, make the most of their minutes. But once Gasson comes back, it'll be an uptick on offense for sure for Kansas State. We'll take a quick break here on the Friday Shoot-Around, and once again, we're sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company. Welcome back in here to the Friday Shoot-Around. I am Ryan Gilbert. Today we're joined by former Wildcat Jay Heidrick. Once again, we're sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company. Be sure to check them out at your local liquor store. Jay, how do you avoid letting this be the high point of your season after a win over Kansas?
I think you just follow what Coach Tang's been preaching. And I think that there's a method to his madness. I mean, the man is smart. Think of it. You go out and you're telling the press, you're telling the public that we got to get KU out of our heads, rent-free, all those things. You create that narrative, and now you're getting people, and your players read the press as well too. They read message boards, they read Twitter, all those things. And now the narrative has gone from we beat KU to no, we beat the number 2 team in the country. And so and I think the fact, again, like I said earlier, that you have a revamped roster, this is obviously important to them, but it's not the K-State fan view where, some of them, this is everything. So I think that this team looks at this as business. That was a great win. But today, nobody cares what you did yesterday. We got to perform today. And I think that this team has done a really, really good job of being focused on that. They have bigger goals than just beating KU. And I know the staff has reminded them of that. And I think that just a masterful job of this coaching staff to keep the players' mindset in the right spot.
Kind of going off of that, and I know we mentioned this, kind of the same way earlier, but how do you not let this be a quote unquote trap game against Texas Tech, who, while the Big 12 is one of it's the best conference in the country, they might be the worst of the best, so to speak. How do you not get that look ahead towards Iowa State, which we'll talk about in a moment, but how do you just not let this be sort of a trap game after a big win? I know that's what I kind of asked you earlier, but yeah, Texas Tech is not the best team in the Big 12.
Well, you just watch them play. They may not be the best team in the Big 12, but they're really good. They're really athletic. They almost beat KU down in Lubbock. So I think that this team is going to look at the film. They're going to see that this is not a rummy team. Their record does not define how good they are. It reflects how the conference they play in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're worried about Tech being a trap team, you just got to watch them play and see the athletes that they have and the work the coaching staff has put in to put them in a position to win. I think that the other thing is that I think this team likes winning. We all like winning, but I think this team has experienced it more than K-State teams have in the past. And I think that it is a belief now that I don't want to say expectation, maybe obligation is the right word, to where our job is to go out. We have a duty to go out and win this game this weekend. And I don't think they view KU as a fluke. I don't think that they view this as, Tech being a rummy of the league. I think they look at it like, we're just going to go out and we're just going to beat people. We don't care if it's KU. We don't care if it's Tech. We don't care if it's Iowa State. We're just going to line up and we're going to beat you. I think that's the mantra that this team has followed. And I think that if they keep doing it, they're going to have a lot of success.
You mentioned this earlier, and just how Jerome Tang kind of downplayed the game against Kansas, and everything that he says is calculated. Everything he says has a reason for why he's saying it. And it kind of goes without saying, he was trying to keep his team calm against KU and not look at it as the Super Bowl, but just as any other game. And he's kind of been consistent with that message after the game that, hey, we got to go back to work and beat Texas Tech. Keontae Johnson, after the game, I don't even know if he knew who the next opponent was. Like, it's just, take that for what it's worth. He was either locked in on Kansas because it's Kansas, or he was locked in on Kansas simply because that was the next game on the docket, right? I mean, I think it's probably the latter of the two, but what do you see out of this Texas Tech team? We'll switch gears and just talk about the Red Raiders. I don't know how much you've watched them this season, but is that a good matchup for Kansas State?
To be honest, I haven't studied them a whole lot, but I know their coach brings toughness. He's going to they're going to be athletic. They're going to crash the boards. For the little bit I have seen, I don't think that they have quite the scoring offensive power that they've had in the past, with particularly with McCullough transferring to Kansas. But they're going to guard you. They're going to put pressure on you. I don't think the possessions, the up and down, is going to be as much as it is. And you look at what I think this is one of the reasons why Bruce had a lot of success against Texas Tech is that they played a similar style to what Bruce did. Slow it down, grind it out, defensive battle. And I think K-State's going to look to push the ball and get more possessions. But that can go back and forth. If Texas Tech slows this game down, much like Oklahoma State wanted to against Kansas State a week or so ago, and K-State doesn't take care of the ball, possessions in a slow game become really, really valuable. And so you got to be smart. You got to take care of the ball. You got to execute, and you can't let Tech dictate. You can't let their pressure dictate what you're going to do. You have to attack pressure with pressure, get up and down, play your game, but be able to adjust as well too. So I think Tech's going to guard. I think K-State's got more weapons, and I think that they've got it. They're deeper. I think that they're able to get more from deeper positions in the bench, particularly if Gassan plays. So I think that it'll be a good matchup. It'll be a hard game, like I said, but it's not one that I think K-State should be overly worried about if it can come out and play its game.
It's interesting because you mentioned the pace, right? Tech's going to probably try to slow you down a little bit. And Tang, coming into the year and probably in the beginning of the non-conference slate, was mentioning how he wants to play a game where you're minimizing what the opponent can do well, right? And now we've gotten to a point, where it's about what Kansas State does well, and it doesn't matter what the what the opponent does. Jay, I mean, how far has this staff come to just, because you look at the Texas game and the Baylor game where they're scoring 90, 100, 110 points, and then they play Oklahoma State and they score 50 or 60 points.
Yeah, that's the big thing that they've done. And Coach Tang a little bit after the Oklahoma State game, the ability to win in different ways.
Yeah.
You go to Texas, you score 116 points. You go score 90 some against Baylor, and you come out of Oklahoma State and you score like 64 or something like that. So the ability to slow down, if you want to slow it down, we can slow it down. We can play in half court. You want to speed it up, we can speed it up. And I haven't seen the advanced metrics from the KU game, but I suspect that it was a slower game than either side probably wanted to play. If you go to overtime and you only score in the low 80s, so I think that and of course it was also, I texted some friends, it was the most entertaining free throw contest I've ever seen. But I think that it'll be interesting to see how K-State approaches this. They make changes. K-State been switching on defense all year. They didn't switch nearly as much against KU as they have in prior games. So they make adjustments on game to game depending on the scout. But it just goes back to, like you said, Ryan, Keontae didn't know who the next opponent was. If you follow K-State coaches on social media, after every game, they have Coach Bourne in particular. He has some 1-0. That's all he tweets. 1-0 on to the next one. Yeah. Doesn't matter who it is. It's on to the next one. And I think that that's the mentality that they have. Is it's 1-0 every time.
I asked the same exact question to Pearson. I'm curious what your answer will be. What qualities does this team share with the Barry Brown teams, the Jacob Pullen teams, the great K-State teams that we've seen?
I think toughness would be one of it, would be the biggest one, and particularly mental toughness. I would also say, particularly with the Barry Brown, not Barry Brown, but the Jacob Pullen teams, the discipline. I mean, I think Frank's teams had their limitations, but I thought they were really disciplined in a lot of ways, particularly defensively, and accountability. Barry was an exceptional leader and held his teammates accountable on a lot of fronts. And I think that Jacob obviously did the same thing, and Frank as well. But I think that those are the biggest things, being able to have mental toughness, have accountability to your teammates, and being willing to just not be scared to step up and believing that you can do it and make a play. But I think probably the biggest thing they share in common is they got good players. This K-State team is talented. Jacob's team is talented. Barry's team is obviously talented. And at the end of the day, like Bob Huggins said, I can have the best jockey, but I'm not winning the Kentucky Derby on a mule. And so I think the quality of players is probably the biggest difference that we've seen for the past couple of years, and the biggest similarity between other successful teams.
Jay, we'll wrap it up with this. Next week, Tuesday, a road game against Iowa State. Obviously, Allen Fieldhouse, there's some tough places to play in the Big 12. Hilton Magic is right up there with that. I mean, how tough is it to win on the road in the Big 12, but also in Ames?
It's always hard to win at Ames. It's hard anywhere, as you said. But K-State's had a lot of success up at Ames. Bruce had some success up there. And I think that this team's going to have success as well, too. It's going to be a fun game. It's going to be up and down. I mean, there's going to be shot after shot, pull up three. It's going to be an entertaining game to watch, particularly if shots go in. They've got Caleb Grills playing at a high level right now. They're playing with a lot of confidence with TJ Olsenberger has them playing well. So I think that it will be another grinder of a game, but it's just going to come down to show up and do what you do. Defend, make shots, take them out of what they want to do, and just go be 1-0. That's all you got to do.
All right, Jay, I appreciate you hopping on with me, man. Once again, we're sponsored by the Part-Time Beverage Company. Jay, I appreciate you, man.
All right, no problem, guys.
All right, thank you, guys. And once again, Jay Heidrick, this was the Friday Shoot Around.